Well, without any ado, I introduce you to Professor Cudjoe. Selwyn Cudjoe is Emeritus Professor of Africana Studies at Wesley College. He began his career here as a teacher at the Tacarigua EC Elementary School. He taught courses on African history, African American literary tradition, African literature, Black woman writers, and Caribbean literature. I have a few of his books, and I supplemented them today because I'm not certain that I have. A graduate of Fordham University, where he received both a BA in English and an MA in American literature. Professor Cudjoe also earned a PhD in American literature from Cornell University. Prior to joining the Wesley faculty in 1986, he taught at Ithaca College and Cornell, Harvard, Brandeis, Fordham, and Ohio Universities. He has been a lecturer at Auburn, New York State Prison, and taught at Bedford-Stuyvesant, New York Youth in Action. Professor Cudjoe is author and editor of several books and has produced several documentaries. He's written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, Harvard Educational Review, International Herald Tribune, New Left Review, Baltimore Sun, the Amsterdam News, the Trinidad Guardian, and Trinidad Express. As president of the National Association for the Empowerment of African People, Professor Cudjoe significantly raised the level of consciousness and activism of people of African descent living in the Caribbean island of Trinidad and Tobago, and attempted to strengthen bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood between African people and Indian people who are descendants of the indentured Trinidad and Tobago. His books, writings, and lectures bear witness to the dehumanization, disenfranchisement, alienation, and abuses of the colonial experiment, slavery, and indentation. They tell the stories of those who are the objects of the system and their inheritors, where too frequently the subjects and their successors in name, law, and title have whitewashed or attempted to make their predations sound benign and or somehow benevolent, without accepting responsibility for restitution. African peoples worldwide, along with our friends and supporters, Trinidad and Tobago, and the village of Tacarigua in particular, are deeply indebted to him. We welcome our son of the soil, Professor Selwyn Cudjoe, and thank you for being here. Welcome.
Like an old teacher will say, stand up, stand up, stand up. So all we hear, stand up, sit down, stretch. I don't know time. It's just great to be here. I'm all my friend and family and things. And I think Gwyneth looking at me like, what is he saying? That's my mother. She mother teach me Tacarigua EC. Gwyneth mother started Tacarigua EC in the infant. A, B, C, D, she mother was my teacher. And I see here, before I thank the Master Ceremonies, Mr. Joseph, and I see Father Maxwell, who of course, is he still? Yes, Father Maxwell is down there. Mr. Peter Berg, among the, well, he's from the OWT, where from? All right, OWT, there's a fighter. Again, the Minister Minister of Education, but I more like to recommend that the thing of Fatima, because that teacher, you could understand the business. I know. Huh? I know about Trinity, no, I don't know. I hear Fatima. At any rate, and so many people who are here. I see Mavis here, I see Cudjoe here, I see Patty Edwards here, I teach Patty too, you know. Swanson, they call Swanson my first cousin, so we know he was with Burnley. Etc., etc., etc. And I saw the netball lady, she left. It's like the netball lady, she left. Sitting close to you. What's her name? Hockey. Of course, Carol James and all of the others. Well, it's good to be here, and I think I should probably begin by locating myself born in Tacarigua. I'm from here. I was christened in the St. Mary's Church. My navel buried there, my mother buried there, my grandmother buried there, everybody did. So I belong to here. Started at Tacarigua EC as a, well, I was not monitor. I was a monitor first, Mr. Clark and Mr. Thomas and so on. And that's where the question of community is so very important as we talk about what we're doing this afternoon as a community activity. I'll probably start by saying, just quoting just very briefly, a fellow called Frederick Douglass, a slave. And Frederick Douglass says, and remember it, power concedes nothing without a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a struggle. We are not begging people for nothing. We are the citizens. And the fundamental roots of citizenship are people, as Carol says. People acting in their own capacity to transform the nature of their own lives. So let us keep that straight before we go on. We are begging nobody for that. We've made Tacarigua, we've made the country. You've asked me to speak about Tacarigua, a historical village in Trinidad. And I probably want to start by suggesting that people who do not know where they come from and know where they're going, nor can they appreciate the importance of their lives and the tremendous portion of what makes us who we are. If you don't know yourself, you don't know where you're going, you don't know anybody. So knowing yourselves and your community is an indispensable prerequisite to being responsible citizens. Very important. So if you say from Tacarigua, you're from El Dorado, you're from Paradise, you're from Binsley, you have to know your community. I want to start by saying that Tacarigua is the oldest community in Trinidad and Tobago. The oldest community in Trinidad and Tobago. But before I talk about that, I have to make I know a song comes sometimes. A scholar from UWI, who's studying from the University of Houston, came to my home. Gail, he was there a few weeks ago, and they're doing a documentary in Tacarigua. But they were concerned primarily with this part where we stand. I hope it's not it's very controversial. But I want to start by saying that today, this land upon which we stand was a Madrasi cemetery. This land on which we stand is and was a Madrasi cemetery. Our parish priest called it Kangalese. Well, when I went to school with Kangali, Michael Kangali, and I think our brother Kenrick is married to somebody who was very much in the church. That Kenrick is, of course, a friend of mine. We went to school together. And about 2 years ago, he wrote me and said to me, Selwyn, what about that old cemetery by the sideboard, the Madrasi cemetery? I say, well, boy, the Madrasi cemetery is not there no more, you know. And then he wrote me to say, and I have the note from March 2nd, 2023. He says, it is a fact, because of course the Kangalese was married, of course, the Bagans and the Trabalese, and Kenneth Bagan. Canon Bagan, who taught his grave right in front, who related to the Kangalese, etc. And he wrote me to tell me, he says, Selwyn, this is what he says, He says, it is my maternal grandfather, Biro Sabat Pasad Nana, was the last person to be buried there in this ground, and that his grave is at the corner of the old train line and the river. And I want to suggest, and I've said it before, we have to begin by respecting our people and respecting sacred ground. Now, I appreciate the fact that we do not know. At Wellesley College, when we have something called Wellesley's College Land Acknowledgement. I'll read it very briefly, because I think it's very relevant. Because it's not just about a savannah, it's about a people's life, it's also about respect for others and their traditions and so on. As we know, you cannot build on religious ground. And we start by saying at Wellesley, we acknowledge that Wellesley College is built on ancestral and traditional land of the Massachusetts people. We also recognize the United States' removal, termination, and assassination and practices resulting in the forced settlement of indigenous people and, of course, attempts to erase their culture. We further acknowledge the oppression, injustice, and discrimination that the indigenous people have endured, and that there's much work to be done on that important journey to reconciliation. I want to suggest and make it publicly that we should place a plaque on this ground to recognize the fact that it was originally a cemetery of the Madrasi Indians, and when we come here, we also stand on sacred ground. And I think we should do that because it's the correct thing to do. It's sacrilegious. As you well know, for example, the wars we were building some big building to discover the slave cemetery. They stopped building right away. So that would be my first position as we stand on this sacred ground. Remembering, and Michael Conway, we went to Tacarigua together, we were both buddies, and he remembered that, and he sent me the note that I have there, and I just think that's something at least we should give consideration to in acknowledgement of that fact. The second thing, Miss Fields, how old is it you? How much? 80-something? 87. Well, my next book, tomorrow morning I go off to the Barbados Archives to continue work on my second book. But this book is called Two Caribbean Preachers. One is Philip Dublin, and the next one is Joshua Stanley. You know Joshua Stanley? All right. Joshua Stanley was a lay reader in that church in Tacarigua. Fields, his wife was Fields, who of course was married to Joshua Stanley. And why is it important? I'll give you a little story. I don't want to talk too much. But Mr. Stanley, Joshua Stanley, who was a lay reader, was of course Inskip. Thank you, Father Maxwell, who sent me the fact that Inskip died a few days ago. But Inskip's father was in fact a lay reader. And one day, somebody had died, you know, he had to talk around the grave, but he was talking to his father. And he said his father used to write his sermons. He's a preacher, you know, they raised during the Lenten season. They preached a lot on Ash Wednesday, and would do other things like the bearers and so on. It turns out that Joshua Stanley, Lennox, said to me, he used to go into the library and write down his sermons. I said, boy, don't you have that? He said, well, I ain't sure, but go to the house. And I went to the old house, and I had about 40 or 50 copybooks of sermons by Joshua Stanley. And in that book, in Tacarigua, he was taking on all, he talked about the importance of Egypt, the construction of the world. And that man there was talking, his first book began in 1915. In terms of the contributions of our people, we have to know what it is. Of course, obviously, this book is about 400 pages away, other than Joshua Stanley. And it's important to have the recognition of people who have struggled in this community to make it what it was. I come in here, and Mr. Arnold, Anton come give me a book, see, a Village in Trinidad by M.P. Allen. And he gave me a copy. He gave me a text. I said, why I have that book? I have the original. Because Mr. Aladdin, of course, was in fact our mate. He brought painting to the schools. But it started in that hour. And of course, when I did my documentary of Tacarigua in 1985, you see how much tree there? How much tree there? I have taken out, there were 10 salmon trees from that main road right down to Mr. Burnley's estate when we were growing up. And we just had to cut down and break up and mash up. And I have on video the cutting on the next salmon tree at the corner right there, and that is on record. Now, when I say that, I don't know what's going to happen to the home of Mr. Stanley, but that should be an historic home. You don't have any other such home. We do not know how to preserve things. I want to again make the picture, I know we're going to do it, but that house is an historic house because it produced one of our most important persons. He was with the village council, he was with the Olive Lodge, etc. And I could go on. But it's a major intellectual in terms of people like J.J. Thomas and all of those guys, Mr. Joshua Stanley. And I have his sermons. It took us a long time to reproduce them. We have them there. And of course, if things go right, I think that that next year, our school, I don't know over there, but they're going to do an exhibit. Again, sometimes we do not appreciate. And I think that's the point that I want to really stress. We do not appreciate. We have here, I don't know how important history is. That little, this is the book I have here. And I got that. This is the first book. I want to talk about what happened. Buy this book. Because the first meeting with the Minister of Education, what's his name? I know. What are your sports? This and Carol. If you want it, that's why you take notes and that's why you preserve history. So we recognize it right here. We don't go no place else. Because it was a worldly struggle started by a fellow called Buggy Haynes and Carol James. And I taught Buggy Haynes in school, right, Patsy? You got? I taught Buggy, Patsy, Kelvin, Buggy. And one day, I must have been true, but we were playing a football game and we were playing at school. Mr. Anderson, Frank Anderson, Buggy did something wrong. And I took his stuff. When I come, we spent school. That in mind that Buggy had. He bet me. So, I say it's important to talk a bit about the history of this place because Tacarigua really is the oldest village in the country. It's approximately about 400 years old. As you know, Tacarigua, the word of Tacarigua goes back to things like St. Joseph and comes over to this. Tacarigua, of course, is about a number of villages. We're really in St. Mary's village. Then you have Paradise, which is predominantly Hindu. Then you have Dinsley, predominantly Muslims and so on. But this is an area which is somebody, I think Father Maxwell said that, was sort of a representation of what Trinidad is. Because what happened after slavery, by the way, you know, is again, the great-grandfather born, Masin Jr. You know what time your great-grandfather born? Oh God, you don't know, you shake your head. Oh, you shake your head, so your grandfather was born in 1833. That's a year before slavery ended. And how we not? We have the copybook. No, my sister, I don't know what it is. We have our grandfather's book, and my great-grandmother was born in 1837. That's 1 year of my grandfather before slavery ended. And then the same little block. But I have the book because he could write, he could read and write. But my grandmother could not read and write because she didn't go to school. If anybody knows what a class of education, when they began free free primary school education in this country? Hello? Anybody here know when they start primary school education in this country? 1900. Before that, you had to pay to go to school. And on my videotape with my uncle, Hamil, he said because my grandma couldn't spend the 2 cents to pay for primary school, to pay for the tuition, she could not go to school. She couldn't write. But my grandfather could read and write, and he kept his little notes in his little book, a copybook from 1917. Now, the young people know that that's a copybook. They are copybook things. Well, the copybook. So that's the kind of things that we have for. And what happened as we start our story, we know for a fact that in terms of Tacarigua, that it is before the Tacarigua was a small, picturesque village in Trinidad, of course, was the quintessential of beauty. From its earliest days, Tacariguans lived together in relative peace and harmony in a community where the commitment of sharing and caring for one another was always a major priority and participation in your community. It turns out that, of course, we are, as Lester Williams, who Ox, everybody know Ox? Lester Wiltshire, he said we are districts from a long time. And what it meant also that we were here even among the Amerindians. Tacarigua is an Amerindian word, like Waikakara or Nikaka. In fact, in this book that I found in a library even a Carib dictionary, about 3 or 4 pages of a Carib dictionary. And of course, Tacarigua is believed came from a village in Venezuela called Tacarigua. It's about 100 miles outside of Caracas. So imagine Brother Man going down to find Tacarigua. I know. And I went and found that village. Of course, as you know, the people who peopled the Caribbean and those islands up to the Tanos in Cuba also came down. So I was trying to suggest at one point there was one land mass, and they came down and came through Trinidad and went straight up to Cuba. But in point of fact, that the Caribs and the Arawaks, more importantly, the Caribs, of course, came through in Tacarigua, is an Amerindian word for these part of the dictionary, how to pronounce the words. Now we know that living, of course, that in Trinidad, although I'm sure that Tacarigua existed in some form before Columbus's encounter with the islands, the name of the village appears for the first time in the historical record in 1595. Thus, as we look around, we're going to begin to understand here about 391 years old, and I can give you the records in terms of a woman called Linda Newsom, who's talking about the fact. After the Arabs came and the white people came and the Spanish, they began to put them in what's called encomiendas. And there were 4 encomiendas: San Juan, Tacarigua, and then this Minister of Culture, they turned them up to Tacarigua. But they were here first. And Tacarigua was one of the first encomiendas among the 4 in terms of where we started. So we go back a long way. And then, of course, you have the question of the Africans. As you well know, the Africans, of course, comes after the Spanish, etc. And of course, we come to Tacarigua. I didn't give you the figures, but it's important to understand that Tacarigua was one of the richest villages by 1802. Tacarigua was in a comfortable position. It possessed 14 sugar factories, the 4th largest number of sugar mills in the island. Tacarigua possessed light rum distilleries and 2 coffee mills. In domestic matters and social condition by Mr. Michael, who came from St. Vincent, and she began to report what's happening here. And this is how she talks about Tacarigua and El Rush. She says,
A steam engine was introduced upon the El Dorado estate in Trinidad, but I heard it disappeared. It disappointed the expectations. The mill had been a cattle and mill formerly, and the steam engine was intended to reduce the expense of so many cattle, etc., etc. But my point is, at that point, Tacarigua was the fourth richest part of the island. And although the actual production figures for the factories of their size are not available, the relative figures give us a good indication of the importance. My point is, we have always been an important community, the foremost community in the country. More importantly, in terms of Africans, compared with San Fernando and Port of Spain, we had the highest percentage of black folks in Tacarigua. All right, and of course the Bajans started coming on. Hayes, Raffit, all of them, but they came with the ship. But the point is, we've always been an important part of Trinidad. Given that, it turns out that what we've had is, of course, sugar production. Now, Carol talked about the fact, Carol knows this what the aqua. But I know playing football, when the rain falls, rain like bucket and drop, and rain fall in the morning, you say no football by 2 o'clock. The football field dry. So we knew there was something going on there. So we lived on these lands. This was really a flat, undulated land with savannas. So they're savanna lands. And if you look at this book on page whatever, and of course again I'll call upon them here, in 1846, see this is an actual picture of the Tacarigua savannas. And of course Mr. Serrano, you know your names, right? He was a surveyor general, Mr. Serrano. If you look at that book, you begin to see, in terms of just behind that picture, they're beginning to develop those lands in the savannah. They were all open lands. Let me read a little something. I'm not going to bore you too much. Why I'm saying Mr. Serrano, he became at some point, this one Serrano became the mayor of Marina. But of course, he was a surveyor general. Look at page 29. And buy the book, buy the book. $20. Page 29. Very book, young fellas, young boys, anybody? It says, now this is 1846, and Mr. Bird is very much concerned about the history of those savannas, apart from ecological dimensions, in terms of the development of the country. And you know, Lord Harris, of course, was a governor. He's going to give us a first educational plan, etc., etc. But at some point, we began to divide the lands up. This is 4 December 1946, 1846. Bear with me a tiny bit. Nice. Martin Serrano, Surveyor General, to the Lord Harris. Trinidad, 4 December 1846. The Surveyor General has the honor to submit for the information of the governor a plan showing a large portion of the natural savannas of Aruca, as well as a small tract of land situated to the northward, and then separated from the said savanna by the high road. It used to be a high road, from East Amino, was a high road, going right to the roots. And then he goes on to say, and whence a small village was already being settled primarily by laborers or ex-slaves having purchased the lots from the properties of such land. In other words, once slavery ended, the slaves or the ex-slaves or the enslaved left the land and formed the villages like Dinsley and Tacarigua, El Dorado, and Dinsley and so on. They began to form their lands. They went out there, and of course, what happened? And then he goes on to say, they already erected on the said savannah 2 churches, one of the Catholic and the other of the Presbyterian worship, also a police station. Now let me tell you something. Tacarigua never had a police station. Tacarigua never had a police station. Every time we were one of the most peaceful villages in this country. Never had a police station. Because we all live together. And he says here, by establishing a village on the said savannah, it would be the means of concentrating a great measure into one point. The population of the quarters of Tacarigua is larger Tacarigua. So in other words, if you go back to 1846, as Mr. Burke, we talk about the savannah, that's where we started. And then, of course, as we began to grow, of course, people again, you don't have to wait for no government, you know, when people need the Apple Corporation. We always see ourselves as objects. We are the citizens. We are, somebody can come and tell you about what you know, but what you know about partners. And that's when it stopped. It was not, that would have been, as everybody's going to put it nice, but all over the place. Before they even moved that, you know what fellow called Chiran? Cecil Roberts. You know Cecil Roberts? Oh God, Patsy, you know Cecil Roberts? Babies, you know, babies. You know Cecil, we used to call him Chiran. And she was so sweet. You know, still sweet. My mother was a nice lady. All she used to play Reverend is our character. And she was just going to the church, and she came. She said, oh God, I'd like to hear Chiran. Because Chiran, of course, was in fact, he was Hindi, and was of course also big. He's very dark skin, severe in Madras. In many times, people cussing black people, and Chiran is listening. They don't know Hindi. They don't know Hindi. And when he started to us, oh God, everybody don't want it. But the fact of the matter is that we all live together, etc., among the people. And so it began necessary to distribute these playing fields among others. So I can tell you, as you all know, when we were growing up, everybody had the playing fields. El Dorado played where?
I see we have some young people leaving. I just want you all to know to look on YouTube for today's lecture, please. Look on YouTube, look hashtag Tacarigua Savannah. Thank you. Sorry, folks.
That's all right, that's cool. But what I'm saying that, of course, so naturally the savannas, of course, people begin to organize themselves. We don't need central government to organize us. If you ask me, part of our problem is we don't allow the communities to organize themselves. At that point, we had something called village councils. And these people came together. In terms of the oldest school in Trinidad was the Tacarigua School. Built in 1837 by the villagers. They're saying it's true, and I can quote it, I want to go and quote again. The church, the first church built in 1840, again, was built by contribution from the villagers. People took care of business. People organized themselves because I wrote a piece called the village council as an organ of popular democracy. The village council as an organ of popular. Everybody was in the village council. Best village, everybody going down there. All right. Even when I have also again, Mr. Burke, when they gave over the land, when the Tacarigua Community Center was built in 1965, I have the program. And here was, of course, the Orange Road people giving out the lands to the Tacarigua Welfare and Improvement Council. And there are 35 such councils. They gave the land to private organizations who were self-organizations. But then the government come up and they just grab it. Well, the government doesn't understand. It sometimes acts legally. That community will belong to the Tacarigua Welfare and Improvement Council. I can give you 37 more, but we just grab it, and we build a school and something, and the people who started it, like my grandmother, my mother, and all them kind of people. I have my mother's book, by the way, she was the general secretary. I have the whole book with all the meeting notices, the garden club, etc., etc. And of course, the question of self-organization began with those people. Of course, we have, of course, the rectory, built in 1842. All right? So the point is that from that standpoint, we've always taken care of business. And of course, these outside agencies, of course, have always been a part of us. Of course, come, 1800, of course, I said these are gentle, undulating lands. If you ever went to high school or primary school, where the sugar grow, gently undulating lands. And here was the perfect place. We produce the best sugar in the Caribbean, the brown crystals. Anybody know about the brown crystals? Orange Grove produced brown crystals. And they use what? A vacuum pan process, as opposed to the Muscovado process of extracting sugar. And so, therefore, when Mr. Burnley came here, he gave all the people money. I hope you find it. He gave all the people money. And of course, he built in 1822, where that Puy Fish Street, I don't know what the correct biological name is, was built with what? Tapia. I don't know if you're from Tonga what tapia is and so on. I know Carol probably danced with tapia. But it was built with tapia that was stronger than anything else and ecologically friendly. He builds that, and he comes to Tacarigua, and of course he becomes of the first governor council. He came from London in about 1880, I think, 1890, whatever it comes, 1902. And of course, he acquires about 13 plantations all over the country. He became one of the richest men in the Caribbean. He lived right by it. That's why I've been trying my best, Carol, to beg them to put a plaque below the Coolie Pistache tree. It's the only tree we have from our Burnley's house. All right? And I'm saying, and that tree is the only memory, a physical memory we have of the present. We used to play cricket in the road there was two roads. One was a big road going down to the factory, and was a side road which was owned by Burnley. And he comes, and of course Burnley, of course, is a big man. Of course, the next thing to never think of the slave masters as fools. They fooling themselves. They were important economists. One thing about Burnley, he was the biggest slave master in this country, right? And when slavery ended in terms of compensation, because when they freed the slaves, they didn't pay the slaves. They pay who? The masters. Return, of course, to get the money from Rothschild. Spent $20 billion to pay the slave masters to free the slaves. The slaves had none. But Burnley got the most money out of that. And after slavery, he was still making money because we have the record. Incidentally, Selwyn Cudjoe, have bought Burnley's archives. I have the archives. I could tell you a story too, but I think for next time. So next time, listen. And I bought it not so much for the people at Trinidad, but like Mercy want to take it. Because they want to put a big exhibit next year with Burnley. We do not appreciate. I'll give you the story. I can tell you the story. Mr. Says, all right, I can tell you the story. I wrote that book on Burnley. It was the first book written about a slave master in Trinidad. Because you can't have slavery without a master, you can have a slave. It's a dialectic process. You can't have one with goes together like that. You can't have one with them. So to have slave race, and I have all the records of the beating the slaves and the national who they won Oregon. I have the records of all those slaves. Coming back to life. Let me tell you about the thing. And so therefore, after I wrote the book, I got a good review, and so I told them, we spoke at Glasgow. By the way, again, Burnley take me money, and he built a whole hall in Glasgow University for white people. When my book came out, I spoke in that hall. He gave money. We don't give back nothing to the people. It's just what he take us from. Even a slave master, he gave back money to school because he came from Glasgow. Anyhow, make a long story short. So I write my book about Burnley. It's the first book about Burnley. And lo and behold, about a year or two later, I got a letter, email, from one of Burnley's family. And they said to me, Professor Cudjoe, you've written this book on Burnley. It's the most important book we've ever had. And we want to alert you to the fact that, that the family is going to sell Burnley's papers, his archives. But it's not like Mambo or Julie or Sarge. We only have one paper. When that's gone, it's gone. It's like the Casablanca that the government bought preserve the Casavans when it was being sought, mainly it had Lord Harris's house and so on. So she calls me and says it's going to be auctioned by, I think, Sitherby, one of those big auctioning companies in London. And we think you're the person that should get those papers. Well, I'm frightened and say, well, yes, but I don't know how to auction and bargain and so on. And she says to me, oh, California, I will bargain for you. I will this one. Her cousins are there. But of course, the race is solid, so it has to go through the process. How much you're willing to, what do you want to start at? Say, well, $300. I don't have. How much you want to go to? I said, well, $1,000. Oh God, you'll have a little bit too. She's okay. And she's going to use her own thing, right? She goes to the auction. This is 3 days later. And she's having 1,000. She's having 300. Somebody say 400. 500. Somebody say 600. And so they realize that somebody else won those papers. So when they got to, I think, about 50 or 60 £100, she had no, I got 1,000. So this whoever the fellow was, Peter and got the papers. Now, Mommy always say, glad to borrow, glad to give. Somebody do a favor, thanks. If you fail, thanks, because we did it. So I duly Miss Gwyneth, as Gwyneth has told me, I thanked her, I said, thanks for trying and so on. So I said, we're going to lost the papers. About 6 months later, I get a call or email from this guy saying, dear Professor Cudjoe, we know you are interested in the book because the only person who written about Burnley, well, he does not know that the woman was bidding for me. I'm black, she's white. I am not there, so he doesn't know who she's bidding for. So he writes me and says to me, Professor Cudjoe, I have the Burnley papers. I know you need to because you're the person written about Burnley. The first book of Burnley was a 16-page book written by another planter from the south. So he calls me and said, well, listen, I'm very much interested. How much you want? You want about 5,000. But I know again, an archive is like mango. I said, let me bargain this. Eventually, I was over here and I settled it. But I bought the papers. And I have the papers. They will take the document would like that. They'll be rushing because you have no papers and stuff about any slave master. No, you're white folks. You know, two things that gentrification and imprisonment come. What is the one thing that gentrification and imprisonment have in common? He's a big scientist. Gentrification and imperialism. What's the one thing that have in common? Or was it? Well, one thing, if they see something they like, they go after it. So they leave Harlem, they leave Boston, they walk back Harlem, they come back and take it over. The people who live there came back. The same thing is true in imperialism. You go to India or Africa, you see the gold, you want it, you come in and take it because it belongs to me, by right. That's the one thing you have in common. So, I said, all right, you settle and I got the papers. Now, in another program, something called Bell, you get money from the federal government. Go beyond talking about education in terms of liberal arts and importance because things like computer science and those different fields are taken over from our liberal arts because you have to be making money with our companies. And I was talking about a month ago in our group. The two things I did. A major book came out on something of the contribution of Egypt to world civilization. And also bring me back to that because I said Egypt was the father or mother of civilization. Greece came after. Greece borrowed from Assyria, Egypt, and Mesopotamia, and all of those countries. I fought that back 30 years ago. In fact, I have the thing in the Boston Globe, a big article by Cudjoe. Everybody in the back. No, the Egyptians, it was too black. Woman just came out last month. Someone wrote a book from Oxford, ancient, whatever, making the same point that I made. But in point of fact, Greece borrowed. They didn't steal, you borrowed. Nobody acknowledged that. And now we know it. So when they see the book and they hear about the archives, they say, Professor Cudjoe, could we have a year from now? Could we use that? And we may also implement it by the papers too. Now, I'll come to the government. When by the minister in the Prime Minister's office, yeah, but she come, I was in the archives, and she came through. She tried to go archives, so I asked them in the archives. The secretary come through, one of the all these persons. She asked me, I said, listen, we have this holy fish there. It's the only truth there. Well, not the truth from the book. Could you kindly do a plaque and put it down? They come once and never ever do. But here these folks willing to buy it. They said they had the money. What would you do, Mr. Aaron? What would you do? The church doors and you look at the overflow. You see some big thing called echoes. Now, who's echoes? The big two stones. Midway between by echoes. He and Burnley's son, Frederick Burnley, are the ones who built the orphan home. Who was called, they didn't call it orphan, they called it that, whatever, and then, of course, in 1884, you know, the Canadian mission Indians have come down from Canada. And what had happened, they began to educate the Indians and so on, and they have the Canadian mission Indians, that's what CMI, they were saying Canadian mission Indians. And Miss Blackadar, who was a white woman from Canada, she was the very first, and I think I have a picture of it in one of my books, the very first teacher at the CMI school. But my father teach there too. And that's what they was to teach. Is to speak Hindi. And in the mornings you have to go down to El Dorado and pick up your children and bring them to school. My father did that. So what we have here is a rich history of a village who of course have had so many firsts, so many important things to offer. Now, as I don't know how you feel when you see those things being destroyed. Carol made the point in her own way, but the important thing is, I'll tell you how stupid we are. You know, people don't think. Is how much it started with? How much? 38? Huh? How much? 57. You're going to 10, right? And we know that it's one of the important aquifers in the country, the whole Eastern. I didn't get this part. I love the point they're throwing you oil and all the concept. And then, of course, you want to build on that. Now, what do you think is going to happen if you build another? But the food court, the food court, because the water runs down. It runs down there. We want to know build up parking, whatever. Now tell me, when 10 years from now you have no water, what are you going to say? If 10 years from now you don't have any water because you have polluted the water there, you of course build up these things on top of the water because the young boy there said he's an economist. Our boy is 37 years. I don't know what he knows about economics. Because secular economics, at one level, you could call it in terms of something of profit. Do you know what the economics people is? The bourgeois economics says it's about production and profits and so on. But we know that economics is a relation between people. A pound of corn who decides a pound of corn. It is people who decide a pound of corn costs X. They are among social relations. And we don't seem to understand that. We figure out what's going on, you can let it happen. But I will tell you one thing, two things have to make a picture. If we don't fight that, as Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a struggle. If you had to struggle that, and sit there a couple of more for that. The first fight we had was with Churan. They wanted the front there for Massey. It wasn't Massey, it was something before the Massey supermarket. And they tried to bring the thing that got your throat with us. And we got together with Churan, all of us, and stopped the Pyramid government from putting up it wasn't Massey, it was the one before Massey, whatever that supermarket was. High low. And I still like, you see, because what we don't do, we don't educate our students and our young people how important those things are. And so I'm suggesting that given the importance, and because we have some questions after, that of course we have to begin to educate our people, one, how important our village is. Two, how important our communities are. And why it's our sacred duty to preserve the integrity of those communities, because they have it now, it will end. You know, so we have a great agricultural society, and in that big savannah, we have agriculture shows, crop over. In that savannah, we bring in the biggest pig, the biggest hog, the submersion that had the best yam, 50 pounds of yams, because it was an agricultural district. We bring in all of the crops and the animals there, because it was an agricultural district. What are we doing now, boy? And when it goes, so the point is, how do we preserve the integrity of one of the most, she calls it, Carol calls it, an iconic space. It's even more than an iconic, it's a sacred space. There must be in any community a sacred space where people can congregate. Philosophers like to say that. But you have to have a space where people congregate and they come together as people. Now we have the biggest fact of mental health. Because everybody home behind the computer. They don't know how to talk to anybody else. And we say, well, we have so much more suicides. Well, you have to, because we are by definition social beings. Apart from being rational animals, we are also aesthetic beings. I don't know how cows get in the morning and say, what a wonderful sunshine. People do that. And to ensure our humanity survival, we better come together and fight them people and say, we have to start at the barest minimum, leave the place as it is, and so we can continue to have one of the most flourishing communities in one of the oldest villages in the state. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Cudjoe. We're going to take questions. Jerry, I think you want to answer as much as possible.
Yes, I will have to. My name is James Richard. I'm the sponsor for the area of for 21 years. The corporation has been mashing up the Bronx over and over and over. I write letters, I send voice message, I send message to the different people, persons who are doing the corporation, and no response. So, myself in a great place, I'm short a national athlete until football on the good and rolling with ball passing over there, and also the lawnmower, what I use, we continue belongs to. There's a person named Dennis Law in the corporation. I am being victimized to Dennis. I'm being working hard, still waiting on my money. Can't get nothing. Every time I call different chairperson to the person who in charge of the corporation has no money. But the have money, the whole things are the area Bronx. So I'm asking authority, God can do something about it, please.
Similarly, I can pitch. I'm really appreciative of the history in that recognizing what you talked about in terms of the rich nature and the population growth. My background is in sexual reproductive health, and with climate change, it means that if the place is going to get hotter, does it mean that if here has most water, are people going to gravitate here? And are people prepared for that? And I'm not only talking about geographic things, because as we know, when election times come, here is one of the spots that you look for. So there are huge implications around that space that I don't think we've looked at as
Another interesting angle.
Robert Oja. Miami like we go on Good Friday, we are on Constantine Park. And I came here this tonight, because I would already show this morning on TV6. And I wanted to come and hear what it said. And funny enough, the problem that we encountered on Constantine Park are similar to the problems that I encountered here in Eliab. I was also the president of the Trinidad Windward Cricket Association.
Windward Association.
Windward Cricket Association. And I moved around the country a lot. And there's a similar problem anywhere you go, where parks, playgrounds, facilities are under kept and not looked after. And when an election year comes around, they come and they probably put a walking pitch, put up a light, they do something for us, and we say that we vote for them. It could be South Central, wherever you want to do it. It's the same mentality. I'm happy for what I'm hearing here tonight from you guys. I'm sorry to hear that you're saying you're old, so a lot longer than you are already. And we may need people like you all to carry the fight on and don't give up. We want myself, we're not giving up on Constantine Park. We are here with Constantine Park day in and day out. And I will tell you back in 1985, 86, the then chairman of the council, Mr. Mervyn Assam, had moved to Constantine Park, where we work at stay right now, into a parking lot for the trucks selling from the council that used to park in front of the courthouse. Right? And we then protested. We went down to county council, we marched, and Mervyn Assam in his cocky manner, said that the voice of the people is the voice of God. And I will give you what you want. And we left the savannah. And yes, as it is, never bothered to even plant grass out, right? Or anything. We never had anything in Constantine Park. And the honest truth is that Mr. Eddie Hart was once the junior minister of sport, and not to see nothing being done at Eddie Hart. It's a shame. It's a crying shame. Right? And I'm not believing anybody or any party or anything like that. To see what Mr. Andrew Roberts came and wanted to do to this piece of real estate was ridiculous. Ridiculous and utter nonsense. But it's something that we in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Cudjoe rightly saying, we're not standing up for anything. We take whatever it is. The store at us, here what? Take that. That's for you. We'll come and park the cars when we want. We'll come and mash up your savannah. Jerry, you will fix it. Right? You will fix it. And they say that I'm building it and county council. Nothing county council. We want a tractor to cut the grass. We want a backhoe that can spread it. But when they want to have their event, they get everything. Don't do water in savannah. Right? So it's really actually a blatant abuse of power by the people in authority, and we allow it to continue to happen day in and day out, and it has nothing to do with red or yellow, because they both do as we say, and you all have to stand up for your rights, and let's get things good. And I am willing, and I'm sure we will do it. We will lend our hand to Eliab, because whatever spills over here will spill over somewhere. Right? And I applaud the effort by you all, and tonight, Mr. Cudjoe, thank you for the education we gave me about Tacarigua. It was most edifying, and I couldn't believe that. What's his name? Mr. Burley. All I know about Burley Sports. Burley Sports Club. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time, and thank you for the education.
Before you take our next question. Before you all go, I just want you to know that the resource that we have to appeal to is you. And we appreciate everyone who gives us their telephone number, your name, your email address, so that Please, next question.
Not really a question, but a suggestion. I have some experience with the soil, and I was quite taken aback when one of the speakers mentioned the indiscriminate disposal of waste soil. If people are not, if they don't know, 1 liter of waste soil, if it gets down into our aquifer, has the potential to contaminate over 1 million liters of groundwater.
Repeat that again, sir.
1 liter of waste oil, if it gets down into our aquifers, or if it is introduced into our streams, it has the potential to contaminate over 1 million liters of groundwater. Yeah? So I want to make a suggestion. There are several companies that once they are contacted will place disposal bins so that the vendors can dispose of their waste oil into those bins. The bins are then collected and the oil is processed. Yes? So I want to make a suggestion to the Save Our Green Space Committee to contact a firm like Eco Impact, National Petroleum, Solid Waste Management, and they will come and place a bin there free of charge in order to collect the waste oil. The waste oil is not, I don't think it has got down into our aquifers as yet, but the first set of, the first impact would be on our fishes, on our birds, and our natural wildlife in the area. And so I want to make the suggestion that we could place a bin there for the disposal of the waste oil.